When I was studying computer science years ago, a particular course stood out from the rest. And this was the Software Internship course, designed to mimic the hours you'd typically commit to a regular lecture. That is, it was expected to be around 4 to 8 hours per week. At least that's how it was pitched to us. In reality, it was more like a 70 to 80 hour work week, so intense that we didn't attend a single other lecture during those months. But this course wasn't just memorable because of its intensity, it was also the setting for a significant mistake I made, one which eventually turned out to be at least a great learning experience. And that's what we're talking about in today's video, so welcome to our new weekly. My time at university feels like a distant memory now. I was pursuing applied computer science, a course that existed before the modern bachelor's and master's. It was all about the diploma back then. It must have been around my 6th or 7th semester when this software internship course was scheduled, and it sounded fun, at least at the beginning. The idea of collaborating with a classmate to develop a web application, diving deep into J2EE, the Java 2 Enterprise Edition, today known as Jakarta, understanding databases and web servers, learning about all these things in detail, and that all in the place of a single lecture was quite appealing. It promised hands-on experience. It was, or it seemed to be, a shift from theoretical concepts like Turing machines and computability. And so a good friend of mine and I paired up and signed up for this university internal software internship course. While we had both used Java during our introductory years, we weren't familiar with its enterprise version yet, only with the standard edition. Nonetheless, our shared foundational knowledge seemed to be a promising starting point. However, our passion levels for Java differed significantly. He was definitely in love with Java, while I was, let's say, less enthusiastic. My primary interest lay in the then newly released .NET and C#, and to put it bluntly, I couldn't imagine a worse language or ecosystem than Java at the time. Perhaps that was a bit unfair, especially since I hadn't yet been introduced to C++ or ML, but while Java didn't exactly make me jump for joy, I reasoned that the differences between C# and Java couldn't be that vast. I hoped the experience would be enjoyable regardless. Our assignment was simple in its statement, but complex in execution: replicate eBay. Not down to every nuance, of course, but capturing its main features and incorporating various auction models. The goal was basically to make it production ready. We had a remarkably bright and gifted mentor, let's call him that, a mentor, and he was keen on us learning through experience, which is a beneficial approach in theory, but when you spend a week heading into the wrong direction only to be given a hint after wasting so much time, it does drain the clock. Regardless, I learned an immense amount from him, making it one of the most valuable courses during my years at university. What was unique about this assignment was not just the building of an auction platform. We were also introduced to a developer's ecosystem, specifically version control systems. Now, it wasn't today's Git, nor even Subversion. We were supposed to work with CVS. And looking back, it wouldn't have mattered which system we used, since neither of us was familiar with any of them. However, the CVS plugin for Eclipse became a major thorn in our side. And when we couldn't find a solution to make it run, we eventually chose, against the instructions, to skip version control altogether. We could have used CVS from the command line, of course, but that felt simply too easy. Our main challenge then was, how do we synchronize our source code? Given our decision to bypass CVS, we resorted to a pragmatic yet somewhat laughable solution, which I'm not particularly proud of in hindsight. We placed a piece of paper between us, and whenever one of us started editing a file, its name was written down, making it basically non-available to the other. Essentially file locking via pen and paper style. As archaic as it sounds, it worked for our purposes, and our typical day involved meeting in the university's computer lab in the morning, discussing our plans for the day, and then sitting down at adjacent PCs to code. And our paper version control sat between us. And late at night, the grand syncing ritual commenced, identifying the files each one had modified, copying changed files from one PC to the other and vice versa. And when necessary, we'd manually resolve merge conflicts. And while it wasn't the most elegant solution, it actually did the job. That is, at least until that one fateful day. I can't precisely recall which feature it was, but it demanded significant changes to our code. We realized this about 30 minutes in while we were both deep in coding, and then one of those classic moments occurred. One of us posed a question, we decided to focus on a single screen to discuss it, and eventually found ourselves working side by side on one computer. Good old pair programming. And when addressing major changes, this approach, in my opinion, is truly beneficial. 4 eyes are better than 2, allowing for more directed and efficient progress. Plus, it eliminates the massive task of merging later on, since such changes often involve modifications to almost every file anyway. Long story short, we spent the rest of the day on his machine. It was a marathon session, ending somewhere around 4 or 5 in the morning. And we were both done, and so was the code refactoring. The logical thing to do at this point? Shut down, go home, rest, sleep, and return the next day refreshed. But not us. We were riding high on euphoria from our achievements, so we thought, what's another half an hour or so? Let's merge now. And it seemed so easy and straightforward. After all, we had worked all day on one computer, his, so the task was simple. On my machine, delete the project directory, SSH into his machine, and copy the entire project over. Seemed easy enough. So I navigated to the project directory in the terminal and punched in the command rm-rf. Those of you familiar with Unix-like systems know this means remove everything here recursively and don't ask for confirmation. I definitely know what I'm doing. I executed the command, and right after I heard a perplexed, "Hey, where did the project go?" And that was when it hit me. I hadn't opened a new terminal. I was using the one from the previous morning, which was still open and which still had the SSH connection open to his machine. In a heartbeat, I had destroyed an entire day's of work. Instant regretting. The mood, of course, plummeted. He was furious, and all I could say was that he might have made the same mistake, a point he vehemently disputed, and probably I would have done this too in his shoes. We sat there, not speaking, just watching the sun rise slowly on a new day. After a while, we considered that the IT center staff would likely be available soon and that the computers in the lab were probably backed up regularly. Maybe, just maybe, if we asked nicely, we could restore our data, or at least some of it. Long story short, our hope was denied. The last backup had been done the previous morning, obviously before we had written a single line of code, and the next one was scheduled in 30 minutes. Great. The end result was that I had to rewrite all the code by myself as a way of making amends. At least I now knew how to do it, and afterwards things processed as usual, luckily. This incident, however, at the time was a major inconvenience, even though it cost us just 1 extra day, considering that instead of spending 4 hours per week, we were at the university 7 days a week, working from dawn to dusk on this project. Our nerves were pretty frayed. It was an avoidable mistake, and from this experience I derived 3 lessons, which I generally try to apply nowadays. Firstly, aim for non-destructive work. For instance, before deleting something you deem redundant because you wish to replace it with a new version, first copy the new version and then delete. This simple principle can save you loads of trouble. Or to give another example, if you wish to use an existing file as a template for a new one, don't modify it to eventually save as under a new name. Instead, make a copy of the original file in the beginning and then work on that copy, leaving the original data untouched whenever possible. Secondly, always test run before doing something in production. Try to test or to simulate what you want to do in a separate environment or on a different machine. For example, if you need to update critical software for your company, don't directly proceed on the production system. Clone it, run the update as a test, and only once you're certain that it's working and you know how it's working, only then you should update the actual production system. Ideally, employing immutable infrastructure is best here, but that's not always possible or available. So be cautious, and when in doubt, make a backup first. And thirdly, for tasks that can't be approached non-destructively or tested on a different machine, before hitting enter, stand up, take a break, grab a drink, wait for 5 minutes, and then return. Read your command thoroughly again, rethink the context, and ensure you're making a conscious, or at least a more conscious decision, rather than impulsively acting ad hoc. Often when we feel too confident, exactly that's when mistakes happen, and some can be really hard to fix. And the time it takes to fix such mistakes is usually much longer than the brief moment or the few minutes you take to step back and double check. However, finally, here's how our story ended, and it's basically a fun twist. Of course, the IT Center lectured us on why we weren't using CVS. Yet, when you approach the right people, problems sometimes get solved in minutes, and from that day on we started using CVS and finally learned how to manage version control without resorting to pen and paper. But recall my initial note about my partner's love for Java and my preference for C#? Well, if there's one debate Java and C# developers will never agree upon, it's about where to place the opening curly brace, at the end of the existing line or on a new one. We, predictably, couldn't agree as well. So every time one of us opened a file, we'd first reform it, resulting in commits with 20,000 changed lines, 3 of which were really important, and 19,997 just moving that darn brace into a new line or removing that new line. We kept this up till the project's end over weeks. And this might be why I appreciate Go's inherent formatting rules today. It simply avoids such silly disputes. And if you enjoyed this video today, please give it a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. While this was more of a light-hearted and in some ways humorous story, there were lessons to learn. Would you prefer more content like this or stick to our traditional videos? Please feel free to share your feedback below. And now, before we wrap up, a quick announcement. As you may have already noticed, last week we've changed our video release plan from Monday 8 AM to Sunday 5 PM Central European Time. And having said that, I hope you have a pleasant Sunday evening and a productive week ahead. And finally, as always, take care, stay healthy, and until next time. Bye.